It's the Russell Brown Show, and this edition, of course, comes to you via the new Puppet Warp feature found in Photoshop CS5. Now, in this show, I'm going to talk about the basics of working with the Puppet Warp tool. There are lots of great capabilities and practical applications for the Puppet Warp tool, but since it's called the Puppet Warp, let's discuss how to make something act like a puppet so you understand all of the fine details. Here we have a fine photograph from the iStock photo library. You can actually download and purchase this image yourself and run your own experiments with this exact same image. Okay, let's get going. I have this image, of course. Notice it's on a background, a transparent background, and I've silhouetted it just as you see here. This is the way I need to work with the Puppet tool. Target this layer, then go over to my Edit menu and down here to Puppet Warp. New feature here inside of Photoshop CS5. I select it. The first thing that comes up is a grid, a web forms over the surface which defines the control points. And over here under Density, you can see it's set to normal. But I'm going to add more points for finer detail. You can select from fewer points, normal, or more points, starting right there here in the options bar. My current mode is normal. I'm going to discuss in a minute the rigid and distort, but let's start with normal right here. Let's go through the basics of laying down the control points. Now, watch this. If you put down a single point onto your subject like this, and let's say a second point here, and then you try and move just between 2 points, notice how it pivots and distorts around those 2 points that you've created. So the thing you want to learn right off is that the more control points you have within your model, the more control and finesse you have over it. Say, for example, I don't want this leg or this foot to move while I'm moving the arms. So I leave a control point there, and I even leave control points in major areas of my subject where I do not want it to move because my goal is to move my arm. I'm going to place a hinge point right here at one of the key hinging points here right in the shoulder, right there. That's where I want it to pivot around. And then I can go out here, right here, click on the hand, and simply start to warp and distort this. And just a simple move. Now, you see how I have not pinned down the second arm here on the left-hand side, and it moves slightly? Once again, what do we learn? Pin down that second item where you want it to stay, and those are really the basics here to getting something to move. Pin it down and then move it around. You can see the applications, practical applications of working on different images, but in this case we can see that it moves around. Now watch in this next demonstration how if I move this down, do you see how the shoulder moves? It's moving with it. It seems to bend. Right up here, if I click on the point, and when I click on a point, it highlights it. That means it's an active point by selecting it, and the black spot appears in the middle. Notice up here under Rotate, it's currently set to Auto. But what if I want to set that down and say, do not rotate the elbow as I rotate the arm. So make it fixed. And I can put in a value there, but watch how now the arm moves, but it's moving much less. Let's show this. Let's bend this down here, then switch this point back to auto, and watch. See how it changes slightly? So you can go in and set exact values for areas of your image that you do not want to be altered in terms of rotation in the process of moving your puppet or your features around like this. So something to keep in mind. That's a nice feature for more control. Now, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to eliminate one of my points. I'm going in here with the Option or Alt key. I didn't want this one, so I hold down those keys and click on it, the scissors, and it goes away. A great capability to go through if you've added a point where you didn't want it. Say, for example, I just want to move this arm. Here's a great feature. Instead of putting a point out here, once again, hold down your Option or Alt key, and you see this selection appears around the edge. I can now rotate around this point. I'm holding down my Option or my Alt key, clicking and dragging around that point. Really nice control for adjusting it. And that can work on any of your points within your project here, and then you can rotate those points and get different joint-like effects as you see here. Pretty nice. Next, I want to show you something that's really, really amazing. I'm going to target this. I'm going to bend his arm right here. And this is a key factor of the whole process. And it's the layering. Now keep in mind this is one continuous Photoshop layer against transparency. Hands in front, hands in back. This is fantastic. Notice I'm targeting this layer. Let's zoom in so we can see this more closely. Notice the arm is in front. But what if we want to send something to the back, right up here? I can select the pin depth. I can move up or down. Let's move this down by clicking a couple times. Did you see that? Sometimes it takes a couple clicks based upon the complexity, but I can go down a level or bring it back up a level. So let's do some magic here. Let's scroll over. Let's eliminate this point with that Option key. Let's go back in here, add the second arm, and let's put the second arm behind. Let's do something really complex like this. So now we want the second arm to go back. So we send it back with this key right here, and the first arm's forward. Select the first arm, send them both back behind. So you can do some really complex, different layering techniques, layers with this whole process. And here's a keyboard shortcut not to forget. The Control key and Control key on the Mac and the PC, the Control key plus the open and close brackets will bring things forward or backward. I'm using the Control key and the open bracket key on my keyboard to send it back, and the close bracket key to bring things forward. Just a nice keyboard shortcut for adjusting things. Imagine the pretzel people you could create with this process of intertwining and combining this process. Keep in mind, for really complex rope tricks like this, you may need to add additional points along the path that you're running here to define areas that are in the foreground or the background as you're working with this process. The points are necessary. You need to define what's in the foreground, what's in the background by the points you select on your image. Let's zoom back out so we can see this more clearly and move this around. Once I'm done, I've rearranged everything where I want it. I can go up here to the top and select this checkbox right here to commit to this change. And let's go ahead and commit to that. It's really nice how this is combining together, and a little Command Z, and we've got a dance going on. You've just seen some great tips and techniques here of working with the new Puppet tool inside of Photoshop CS5. Take these basics and move on and take a look at some of my other tutorials where I take this to the next level and apply these to some really interesting projects.